Hello, my friends. Welcome to another episode of the Savvy Painter Podcast. I'm your host, Antrese Wood, and if you've been listening for a while, welcome back. And if you are new here, I am so glad that you have found me. Savvy Painter is the podcast for artists who want practical, tactical tips to create a meaningful art practice that is both fulfilling and supports you. So last episode, I introduced what I'm thinking of as the artist GPS. The idea that before you can navigate anywhere, you have to know where you are. You need to know where you're starting from in order to get where you want to go. And today, I want to get more specific about two of the seasons that you experience in your art practice. So here's what I've been thinking about. If you drove the same coastal road twice, maybe once in autumn and once in spring, that road would be familiar. The turns, the landmarks, the distance, all the same. But the experience of that landscape would be completely different because the light would be different, the colors are different, what you would notice on the drive is different. So the territory is very similar, but it appears completely different. And that's what I think it's like to move through your art practice during different seasons. The practice is yours. The canvas, the commitment, the curiosity, all of that is the same. But the experience of it changes depending on where you are in the seasons. So today I want to get a little bit more specific about two of those four seasons, the making art season and the sharing your art season. So if you remember the last episode I talked about, there's four things we do. We make art, we share art, we sell our art, and we rest. We recuperate so that we can do it again. So this episode, we're going to talk about making and sharing. Sometimes artists who are in the making season are really feeling that tension to be doing more to get their work out there, to get their work seen. And artists in the sharing season often feel this tension, this pull to be in the studio more. And these two seasons seem to be where a lot of us get stuck. So I wanted to talk a little bit more deeply about those two today. So let's start with the making art season, because honestly, that's where we all love to be. And the making art season is exactly what it sounds like. Your primary focus is creating the work itself. It's where we all want to be the most, I know. In the literally thousands of conversations that I've had with artists, I hear over and over and over again, I just want to paint without all the interruptions. I hate the admin side. I just want to be in my studio painting. That is my happy place. Why can't I be there all the time? Or my studio is my sanctuary and I just want to be there constantly. Or I just want to be outside painting as much as humanly possible because I just love it so much. Or I just wish I could be in my studio painting freely. That's what I really want. I don't want to have to deal with all this other stuff. The thing is that when you know that this is the season that you're in, you can be in the studio painting freely without all of those distractions that pop up in your mind, without all of that other noise that comes with it. You can be in there fully focused and in the zone of painting, which sounds amazing, right? To be able to be in your studio without all of those intrusive thoughts like, should I be sharing my work? Should I be marketing? Should I be promoting my work? Should I be doing this? Oh my God, who's going to actually see this work? When you are clearly and concretely in the making art season and you are committed to being in the making art season, you can let go of all of those intrusive thoughts because you know that all of those other seasons are accounted for and they're coming up and that you will naturally move into them. So you can just be fully present where you are in this moment. There's that artist GPS thing again, right? Once you know where you are, then you are able to be present in that moment, knowing that everything else has a place and will come in its own time. So whether you're in the exploration and discovery phase of the art making mode, or you are honed in and focused on a body of work, or maybe a series that you want to create, you can do either of those freely once you are oriented, once your GPS is set to this is the making art season, and this is exactly where I'm supposed to be and what I'm supposed to be doing. Some of the most significant creative breakthroughs I've ever witnessed have happened for artists who gave themselves full permission to just create. So here's a story that illustrates the power of knowing which season you are in and the relief that it brings. So one of the artists in my community, Elaine, went through a period of pretty heavy family obligations, the kind that need your full attention and care. And for about 3.5 months, while she cared for her family, she didn't paint. So afterwards, she initially felt like she should just be able to jump right back into her studio and make up for lost time. But that's not what was happening. She was back into her studio, but she still wasn't painting. And for a lot of artists, it can be triggering when you are not painting. If you've had this experience, you might remember that it had felt uncomfortable. Like you had maybe betrayed your painting practice somehow, or like you were not a real artist. There's lots of different stations our brain might have tuned into. The ones that play that song like, see, you have the time, but you're too lazy. Or what's wrong with you that you're not painting? Or you have no ideas. Nothing you paint is even working. Those are all the songs that get played over and over and over on repeat in our brains when we're in that place. They all suck, but we still listen. They're just incredibly uncomfortable. So Elaine told me that she sat with her own discomfort for a while, and then she made a decision about painting. She decided, I'm just not going to, and that's okay. I'm going to let this season be very gentle and soft and kind. And so what she did right there was she let herself be in her rest season fully, without a countdown for when she would get back to work. She didn't set a deadline for how long she, quote unquote, should rest. She just let herself rest and recalibrate. And then what happened when she felt recharged and grounded again, she came back with 10 paintings going on at the same time. It was like the floodgates opened. She had all these different pieces up that she was working on concurrently, just like going from painting to painting to painting. And she was recharged. She was ready. So taking the time to care for the people that she loves was not a detour. She wasn't behind when she came back. She was exactly where she was supposed to be. And that's exactly how this works. Our painting practice doesn't exist in a vacuum. And we all have lives, and we all have people we love, and we all want to be there for them. And we all have, I know, shocking, we all have other things outside of our painting practice. So I think Elaine was a great example of why knowing which season you're in matters so, so much, because it allows you to come back and just drop right in. It allows you to be in the season that you're in fully and completely, and then move into the next season with absolute focus, because you were present in that last season. When you're resting, you're resting. When you're painting, you're painting. When you're showing your work, and in that process, you're fully focused on that. And in none of those scenarios are you wasting your brain energy thinking that you should be somewhere else, or beating yourself up because you're not doing everything from all 4 seasons in the same day. For example, if you're not clear on which season you're in, you might be technically in the making season, but you might also be trying to run a full sharing season and selling operation at the same time. And when that happens, you're not doubling your output. You're splitting your attention in a way that can push you out towards an area where you just start to feel completely overwhelmed. Or it pushes you, if you remember me talking about the zones, it pushes you into an area where you are triggered, where you get into that what I call the zone of terror, where you get into that area, which means basically that you're dysregulated. And when you're dysregulated, you don't have access to all of the brain function that you need in order to make effective decisions, in order to focus, in order to be creative, in order to think outside of the box, or to do anything with your artwork. So knowing what season you're in and knowing what you need is important because it allows you to just be present with where you currently are. And it gives you a framework to understand, hey, it's okay for me to be in this season. I don't have to do everything all at once. I can just be right here where I am, doing the things that I'm focused on doing, and then allow all of those other things to happen when I transition into that next space. So that's an example of Elen who, when she allowed herself to be in the rest season and allowed herself to fully recover without trying to push herself into making something when she really needed that rest season. If she tried to push herself into making, then she wouldn't be making. And also, as important, probably more important, is she wouldn't be allowing herself to recover and rest either. So that's kind of the gist of it. If you weren't clear on what season you were in and you were trying to be in all of the seasons at the same time, it means you weren't in any of them. And that's when it might have really started to feel like you were spinning out or you were not getting anywhere, even though you might have felt very busy. You weren't effective and you weren't creating anything. And by the way, you can still be solidly in the making season and have a little bit of attention on what is coming next. So as an example, you might be in the making system and doing small things to build your email list kind of quietly in the background. But you're still clear on what your priority is. You know that your priority is making art, and then on the back burner, maybe you are attending to a couple of other things. So what that might look like is it's kind of like an 80-20 thing, not necessarily like a 50-50. So if 80% of my allotted time for painting is spent painting, and then after I've done that, or in this designated time, I might spend a little bit of time attending to something else that might be in the sharing zone or it might be in the selling zone. So knowing that is a relief because you're not distracted by this idea that you should be doing all of it at once, all at equal amounts. When you know what season you're in and have a direction, a goal, a destination on the map, that's when something really useful starts to happen in your practice. You know what's normal for this season. You know what to expect. And then that knowledge lets you evaluate any of the voices that might come up with a lot more clarity. Some of the voices are relevant to the season you're in, and some of them aren't. And once you can tell the difference, you can let the irrelevant ones just pass right through without giving them any more attention than they deserve. And that in itself is enormous. It gives you so much more confidence in your own choices. So I want to tell you another story. This story is about an artist named Dinah because I think this is a really clear example of what changes when you shift that story that you're telling yourself about your practice. So Dinah had been describing herself as someone who, quote unquote, never finishes a body of work. That was the story. I never complete a body of work. I'm doing it wrong. There's a way this is supposed to go, and I'm not doing it that way. And if you know me, I have some issue with that. And I just want to stick up for my friend Dinah, even when it is coming from herself. But here's what was actually happening. Dinah follows her curiosity. When her curiosity runs out on a subject, she moves on. When it picks back up on something new, she goes there. So it's not exactly incompletion. It's a practice that is organized around curiosity. So as we were talking about this over a period of time inside Growth Studio, she found a different story. She came in one day and she goes, I follow my curiosity, and if it becomes a body of work, great. And if it doesn't, then that's okay too. So what I love about this is what changed wasn't her process, so she didn't fight against herself. What changed was her understanding about her process and her acceptance of the way that she naturally works, which allows her to work in the way that serves her and also builds trust in her own decisions. What was on her canvas had been a reflection of a story that was not serving her. The canvas didn't change. What shifted was her ability to see it more clearly. And that moment when she noticed that the story she'd been carrying around wasn't serving her, and she consciously chose a different one, that noticing creates something different. There's a slight pause where she has an opportunity to make an informed choice. Because normally what we human beings do is we have all sorts of shortcuts happening in our brain, and most of them go unnoticed. For the most part, these shortcuts really, really serve us, because if we didn't have them, we would just be in a constant state of having to make decisions and feeling overloaded. So these shortcuts are what our brain creates in order to help us move along more efficiently. So once Dinah had that pause and she was able to make a different choice, she disrupted that normal habitual thought. What she learned was that she already had what she needed. She'd been a curiosity-led artist all along. She just hadn't had a name for it that felt like the strength that it is. Now I want to spend a few minutes on the sharing season, because this season often follows the making art season, but often it's in a way that feels a little bit abrupt or disorienting. The sharing season is when you start putting your work in front of people. And for a lot of artists, that transition is the hardest moment in the whole cycle, because there's a lot of anticipation that comes with it. So imagine you've been in your studio and the work has been between you and your canvas, you and your sketchbook, you and whatever substrate you work on. And now you're inviting people into your very personal space. That is a real vulnerability. And I'm not just talking about the physical space of your studio. I'm talking about the emotional space of showing people your work. So when you post something, for example, on Instagram, it's not just posting on Instagram. You're letting people see what you really, truly care about. The making season asks for your focus and presence with the canvas, and it is a solitary event. The sharing season asks for courage and self-trust in a different way, because now you are no longer in a solitary environment. Now you're inviting other people in, and those are very different muscles that you are using. So it requires a lot from you, because you're moving from that solitary environment into maybe a public environment, or maybe it's a community environment. And you can't rush into the sharing season without having done enough work in the making season to actually trust what you're bringing forward. The trust starts internally, and then there's the trust of showing it to other people. Artists in the sharing season often tip toward what I call the ring of terror, because they're not tracking where they are emotionally. The discomfort of being seen is very, very real, and it's really easy to mistake growth zone discomfort for a signal that something is wrong. So here's what I want to offer you instead. The discomfort is the terrain of this season. It doesn't mean you should stop. It means that you're in the growth zone. You've left your comfort zone, and you're in the zone where you are starting to build this tolerance for being seen. And your work is to stay in this zone without letting it overwhelm you. The discomfort and the growth are the same thing. And when you know that, you can tend to it in a way that allows you to keep going in a way that serves you and feels doable for you. So here's what I want to leave you with today. If you've been carrying any sense of being behind, like everybody else knows what they're doing, everybody else is further along, like you should be doing more, or like you've been in the making season way too long, here's what I want to invite you to just check in on. Ask yourself, am I actually behind, or am I in a season? Because those are completely different situations. And In my mind, only one of them is real. So when you know which season you are in, the noise quiets down considerably and your path forward gets a lot clearer. So if you're still working out which season you're in, there is a simple orientation guide that I'm making at savvypainter.com/map. Just takes 2 to 3 minutes, no overwhelm, just getting your current location on the map, and then there's some resources for you. This is the kind of work that we do together inside Growth Studio every single week. So if you have been curious about Growth Studio, I will also put a link in the show notes where you can get all the details and sign up if now is the time for you. Okay, that's what I have for you today. Have a wonderful week, and I will talk to you soon.